With an abundance of hair on her arms and legs, a yellowish face without grace and a disproportionate body, she was one of the most desirable brides of her time. The reason for this was her wealth. Anna Gould's fate illustrates that although the European aristocracy saw American women as a source of finance and a way of maintaining the usual luxurious lifestyle, these women themselves were often not simply naive people with fat purses, but interesting personalities able to find their place in an unfamiliar world. Anna Gould was born on the 5th of June, 1875, the fourth of 5 children of J. Gould and his wife Helen Day Miller. Anna's father was as rich as he was hated by poor and millionaires alike for his achievements in the railway industry. The reasons for this intense hatred remain unknown. Part of it was anti-Semitism. All his life Gould had been regarded as a Jew. But Gould came from an old Protestant family of Puritan settlers who had come to New England in the 17th century. His family was poor and numerous. He had more than 50 cousins. The poverty was compounded by the fact that the families had many children and the men were often alcoholics. No one wanted to work. It was his father's alcoholism that caused Jay to shun alcohol. It was his personal taboo. Unlike his father, he strove to be a good husband and a loving father to his children, whom he spoiled. And he was not at all upset about being rejected by New York's elite. After a day's work, all he wanted to do was return home, spend the evening in the company of his wife and children, and immerse himself in his favorite book. While he respected his mother's and his wife's religiosity, he avoided displaying his own. He stayed away from church to avoid being seen by outsiders and the press. He rented a pew in an unfashionable small church in New York and made donations anonymously and without publicity. He began his career modestly. He started out as a tanner in Pennsylvania, but his business did so well that an entire town grew up around one of his tanneries, which he immodestly named Gouldsboro. After the financial crisis of 1857, he began to invest in railway companies. With an incredible talent for it, he soon made millions of dollars from a huge number of these investments, which were more like speculation. In 1868, he managed to survive the Vanderbilts themselves from the Era Railroad Company and became its head. The Vanderbilts never forgave him, and for a long time they were behind the boycott that followed him around the community. In 1869 he was rightly accused of trying to profit from the collapse of gold on the New York Stock Exchange, when in fact he lost money. He soon recouped this loss through successful investment and speculation, to the point where it was said that the Wall Street Exchange was his personal bowling alley. At the time of his death, his fortune was estimated at $80 million, which would be about $2.24 billion today. It was his youngest and favorite daughter, Anna, who inherited his character. She was not a beauty, quite the opposite. Short, with an unhealthy yellowish complexion, bulging eyes, and a lot of hair on her arms and legs. What she lacked in looks, she made up for in education and an iron will. After the death of her parents, her education was taken over by her older and religious sister, Helena. Anna loved her sister, but the puritanical way of life dragged her down. The only way to gain independence was to marry. The choice was not an easy one. Jay Gould adored his daughter, but knew her better than anyone else. Although Gould left his fortune equally to all his children, a rare practice in the 19th century, he stipulated that Anne could only marry with the consent of her older brother George, who was to manage the family trust fund, then worth $12 million, about $336 million in today's dollars. This meant that Anna had to find a groom who would suit both her and her brother. At first, 18-year-old Anna turned to her brother's friend Oliver Herriman, the handsome but dull heir to a New York millionaire. The Gould family were suspicious of this choice, but eventually agreed that Anna should travel to Paris to prepare a dowry. It seems, however, that the betrothal to Herriman was merely an excuse to escape her older sister's care. In Paris, Anne stayed with the opera singer Fanny Reed, who quickly introduced her to the European aristocracy by introducing her to the French Count Boniface de Castellane. Marie-Ernest Paul Boniface de Castellane, known simply as Boney, was the eldest son of Marquis Antoine de Castellane and Countess Madeleine Leclerc de Juinet. The Castellanes belonged to one of the oldest families of the French aristocracy from around the 12th century, as old as they were poor. Boney wrote in his memoirs that when his grandmother, the Marquise Pauline de Castellane, traveled from her chateau to Paris, the station master deliberately delayed the train so that they wouldn't have to rush to get on. Her family were ultra-Catholic and supported the return to the French throne of the conservative Count of Chambord, Henry de Bourbon. In the second half of the 19th century, as the Legitimists sank into political oblivion, the Castellane family sank into debt. Boney, a man of refinement and good manners, knew that his future depended directly on a wealthy wife. Anna Gould seemed to him to be a gift from fate. He quickly realized how much he would gain from such a union. He was not embarrassed by Anna's looks, which he said were not brilliant. Her beauty was in her abilities, he frankly admitted. Boney, who had borrowed money for a ticket to New York on the eve of the wedding thanks to Anna's financial situation, saw her as an ideal. He later described his meeting with Anna as follows: her face was saved from mediocrity by an impressive nose. I decided that it would be fascinating to complete her education in marriage and then present her to the world to be admired. But in his arrogance he failed to appreciate Anne's character. While he saw in her only a shallow and dull woman, his more discerning friends warned him, "Can't you see that her outward delicacy conceals an iron will?" But Boney arrogantly replied that iron can be bent into the right shape. When Anne announced to her family that she was going to marry the Count of Castellane, the relatives were against it. However, Boney's charisma and aristocratic background helped him win the favor of Anne's brother George. Eventually, the Gould family agreed to the marriage, but insisted that, under American law, Anne should retain full ownership of her fortune. The wedding took place on the 4th of March, 1895. In keeping with the high society of the time, the ceremony was not held in a church, but at the Gould family's New York residence. The wedding was performed by the Archbishop of New York, and the witnesses were the French ambassador to the United States and Boney's brother. Anna wore a magnificent gown ordered from Paris at a cost of $6,000, about $187,000 in today's money. She was sent $12 million, $336 million in today's money, from which she received an annual income of $750,000. The family insisted that their fortune remained theirs alone, and Boney was paid only a handsome annual pension. The newlyweds went straight to Paris and settled down. With Anna's money, Boney built a magnificent palace, the Palais Rose, so called because of the pink marble used for its paneling. The exterior of the palace was modeled on the Grand Trianon in Versailles, and the interior was a replica of the famous ambassador's staircase from the Palace of Versailles. The 6,000 square meter palace included a 180-seat ballroom, theater, conservatory, and library, and was equipped with all the modern conveniences of the time: running water, central heating, and electricity. Over $43 million in today's money was spent to build the palace. In addition to the Palais Rose, Anna bought the ex-20th century Château du Marais near Paris, which quickly became her favorite place. In 1902, Boney bought the Château Grignan in the south of France, which he intended to restore and decorate at his wife's expense. Together they organized lavish receptions, and Anne, who spent huge sums on her clothes, quickly became a style icon in Paris. In 1898, again thanks to Anne's money, Boney became a member of the French Parliament, representing the monarchists. However, their lavish lifestyle and endless building projects meant that, after a decade of marriage, the couple had accumulated debts of more than $10 million, equivalent to around $297 million today. That's when Anna's family stepped in, restricting Boney's access to his wife's assets and cutting their income. Although they had 3 sons, their marriage began to crumble. Boney was almost openly having love affairs and openly admitted that he had married Anna purely for money. On one occasion, while showing one of his guests around the Palais Rose, he pointed to his wife's bedroom and declared, "A room for redemption." Anna eventually decided to end the marriage. As I said, she had an iron will and a determined character. On the morning of the 26th of January, 1906, she had breakfast with Boney as usual, accompanied him to a parliamentary session, and said goodbye. When he returned that evening, he found the palace empty. The whole place was dark, the rooms empty, the furniture gone. Anna had left, taking the children with her and turning off the electricity. An old priest was waiting for him at the foot of the stairs, and he said, "She's not coming back." Boney was shocked and angry. His income was immediately cut off as Anna stopped providing for him. Losing control of the situation, Boney began to try to win her back, enlisting the support of influential ladies of high society in Paris. All in vain. The arrogant, insolent Boney missed a rich woman. Although she was not beautiful, she was intelligent and well-mannered. If not love, then mutual respect and friendship. But Boney wasn't clever enough. He could not understand why his simple girl, as he called her, had decided to break with him. It seemed to him that his title and influence would bring Anna back, for he was sure that it was he who had made her famous. When Boney asked her why she was so friendly with him on their last day together, she replied, "Because it was the last time." Anna filed for divorce, which was a real downfall for Boney. His position in society, his financial status, his political ambitions, everything collapsed. In those days it was extremely difficult for a woman to get a divorce from her husband, especially if he refused. But Anna proved Boney's infidelity, and after much litigation he agreed to the divorce. It turned out that Anna and her family had been collecting evidence of his many infidelities for years. The divorce ultimately undermined Boney's life. As well as losing his rights to Anna's money, he found himself isolated in society. His political career went down the drain, and his debts and lavish lifestyle led to complete financial ruin. Nevertheless, Boney could not accept defeat, and for several years after the divorce he tried to obtain an annulment from the Catholic Church so that he could remarry. Anna, even as a Protestant, refused to consent to the annulment, making the process even more protracted and painful for Boney. He tried appealing to friends, contacting dignitaries, bribing judges, and influential church officials. Even the Vatican itself took up the case with several commissions and compositions. Anna, for her part, stubbornly defended her rights, believing that after all the humiliation of the marriage, she would not allow Boney to marry anyone else in the church. At the end of his failed confrontation with Anna, Boney, having finally accepted defeat, found himself in exile. Disillusioned and devastated, he tried to rebuild his reputation by publishing a memoir, The Art of Being Poor, in 1925. The book described his heroic efforts to maintain his former lifestyle at Anna's expense. These revelations only revealed his character at its most unsavory, as a man utterly convinced of his own exceptionalism and incapable of appreciating the people on whom he was financially dependent. Meanwhile, Anne found happiness in her marriage to Elie de Talleyrand-Périgord. Her new marriage proved to be more successful, peaceful and harmonious, despite the bereavement that had befallen the couple. Their son, Howard de Talleyrand, died tragically at a young age, which was a heavy blow to both of them. But even after this ordeal, Anne managed to maintain her strength and continued to lead an active social life, supporting cultural and charitable projects. Anna spent the last years of her life in the USA, where after the Second World War she settled in the family estate of Lyndhurst. This magnificent estate became her legacy, and founded the Gould Family Museum there and opened it to the public. She devoted considerable resources to its upkeep, making Lyndhurst a place where the memory of her family and their contribution to cultural heritage would live on forever. Anne died in 1961 at the age of 86, having remained true to herself in the face of public expectations and difficult circumstances. Her life, unlike Boney's, was an example of strength, independence, and the ability to find oneself in the most difficult situations. Her legacy survives in the form of many restored castles and museums. She may not have been beautiful, but her soul was.